Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Master of Orion 3. In this episode, we're going to delve into the nuts and bolts of how you build your colonies. And this is very different from, honestly, any other 4X game that I've seen. And it's certainly quite different from Master of Orion 2, although it is inspired by it. And in a sense, it's kind of like a hybrid between Master of Orion 1 and Master of Orion 2. And let me just say, I do think it is one of the strengths of this game. This game has a very complicated way to manage your economy and your empire, and then it has a really good AI and kind of governor system to do it for you. So the key is understanding how the government, the automatic AI is going to run your economy so that you can tell it what your priorities are and make that happen. And then you can come in and manually make a few tweaks when needed. So each planet has a size, which is going to affect the number of regions you have in it. This planet is size 6, so it has 6 regions here. You can see region 1 to region 6. Now, each region is either plains or kind of mountains at the other extreme, and in the middle you have sort of a hybrid terrain type. This is so that aspect of the region is going to determine is a multiplier on the mineral yield of the planet. So if we look at this region here, region 1, if we look here at the mining efficiency is 2, but here in the mountains, the mining efficiency is 5. And if we go into the intermediate area here, the mining efficiency is 3. So mines, ideally, you only want to build in the mountains. In addition, the mining efficiency is affected, of course, by the mineral rating of the planet. This is an average planet, but you can have rich, very rich, or poor, and very poor. So ideally, you want to build mines on very rich planets in the mountains. As it stands, we have 2 mines in the mountains on our homeworld. Now, food, the bioharvest is what it's called in this game, but farming, is also determined by the region. So a plains is going to be will yield food more easily than mountains. But there's another multiplier here, which is the fertility of the region. And how green it is if you're not familiar with what these words mean. So alluvial means there's a lot of rain, whatever. This is more farmable than fertile, which is more than arable, which is more than hard scrabble, which is more than subsistence. This basically means it's rocks. But if we compare here, for example, this intermediate region to this intermediate region, this one has subsistence. The bioharvest efficiency is 3. This one has arable. The bioharvest efficiency is 5. So arable is more farmable than subsistence. Now, these alluvial plains have a bioharvest efficiency of 12 because we're combining the positive modifier from being a flat terrain plus the good fertility of this region. Okay, the mountains here are fertile, except they're mountains, so it only ends up being a 6 bioharvest efficiency. Now, by the way, bioharvest efficiency basically means the amount of food that you're producing. And so when you see a technology or a building that's going to increase the efficiency by 1 or whatever, it means we're making 1 more unit of food. Okay. Now, when you look at a planet, it has a biodiversity rating and an average fertility. So the average fertility is telling you, what the average of all of these leaves here is on the side. And the average biodiversity is telling you what the spread is. So, for example, the average might be hard scrabble, but you might have a whole bunch of red subsistence, or even worse, I think there's one worse than that, and a bunch of alluvial, and they just kind of average out to being, hard scrabble. But that is actually going to give you a fantastic farming as long as those alluvial provinces are plains. So you can't automatically assume that a very biodiverse planet is going to be very farmable, because it could be that the alluvial terrain is stuck in mountains, for example. That's just something to keep in mind. Okay. So that's for mining and farming. Now, in each region, you can designate two economic zones or DEAs. DEA is what? Development, economic activity, maybe something like that. Anyways, the choices are bioharvesting for farming, mining for minerals, industry, research, government, military, and recreation. All three of government, military, and recreation all have an unrest reduction capacity, but they also have other things that they do. So the government DEA reduces unrest. It also allows the building of government type buildings, and those tend to be boosts to, well, first of all, you can have your local government and the local seat of government. That gives boosts to the planet. Um, you also have buildings that can be built here, which are going to increase what just modifiers to the population in general. And it just has a modifier to industry. So you typically want to have at least one government DEA. Well, you probably want to have one government DEA on every planet, unless it's like a tiny colony, and then you just want to have a bunch of mines, for example, or a bunch of research labs. Especially if it's going to be a manufacturing colony, you definitely want to get the multiplier from the government DEA. The recreation DEA is very good also at reducing unrest, and it synergizes well with trade because it can generate quite a bit of income with a spaceport and things like that. And mainly its function is to reduce unrest. The military DEA also reduces unrest, and the buildings associated with it are some are related to like scanners on the strategic map, but it also, I believe there are some buildings, I forget which ones, I think it also helps with the recruitment of ground troops. So for your manufacturing centers, which are going to be producing most of your ships and ground troops, you'll want to have a military DEA. Now, you can designate on each colony in each region which DEAs you want to have and do it all manually. But this game is operating on a larger scale, if you will, than Master of Orion 2, where you might have like maybe a dozen colonies in a well-developed empire. But here, you're going to have dozens of colonies quite easily. And you cannot afford to always be micromanaging all of the planets. Now, you can set them up once you colonize them and then forget them, but that's not really going to work. So you have what are called development plans, which are going to tell the AI what the priorities should be on your colonies. Now, the way the development plans work is they use the classification. So each planet gets, by default, two classifications, and if you want to, you can override one or the other of these with a player-defined set of priorities. Now, what are the different classifications? They are, well, there's one for all that's going to apply to all planets, but you can be a frontier planet, a secondary, a primary, or a core planet. And these are basically, these will evolve over time, right? Your initial colony might be a frontier colony, but later on it will evolve to become a core colony, and the game will just update the classification as time goes by, as the circumstances change. You have red ring, yellow ring, green ring, sweet spot. These have to do with the terraforming status of the planet. You have mineral poor, mineral rich, low and high biodiversity, pretty self-explanatory. Small, large does not often pop up as one of the two that the game automatically chooses because there are others that tend to get prioritized more. Same thing for mining, farming, manufacturing does not kind of get chosen automatically by the AI. However, newly conquered, newly acquired, ravaged, unrest, besieged, starving, these are all things that the AI will choose to as a planet classification. So we want to set up priorities, and the way the priorities work is that whenever a governor, like a colony governor, is going to choose what kind of DEA should I build, they will look at, or it's not just what kind of DEA should I build, but what should I spend my money on, because there's more than there's more to this game than just building DEAs. You are going to invest money in structures within the DEAs. And you also have to manage your economy here. For example, are we spending all our money on economic development, which is buildings and DEAs and things like that? Are we spending our money on terraforming if we're not already terraformed to the optimal level? Do we put any extra money, do we divert funding to research? How much of our money is going to go into military production and into domestic production? And this is actually where the buildings are produced. So all of these sliders are managed automatically by the AI. The tax is managed automatically, and then any surplus that suppose you had a colony and it's built all the buildings, it can send back money to the empire, and this is what gift to empire is, and therefore help other planets so that they can use grants to build their buildings even though they have very poor local production. So all of this is going to be managed automatically, but we have to tell the empire, like, well, how much terraforming should you be doing on new planets? How much should we be spending on military versus research? And when we're building new economic activity, should it be mines? Should it be industry? Should it be research? How should we manage that? So this is what these development plans are for. So for example, I could say that overall across my empire, I want the priority to be manufacturing. So that means, so let's see, manufacturing here. Actually, I'm going to load up a file here that I've already prepared for this game just because I don't want to click so much. But let's look at what we've got here. And all I've done here is I've gone manufacturing primary, click, then you can set this to secondary, go down to research. Oh, I hit manufacture, but I meant research. They say add plan, and it'll just add it in here. The UI isn't too hard to figure out. So if we look here, I've got all planets manufacture, research, recreation. Now, this means that if you imagine points, I actually forget the exact points. I believe it's like 0.6 or 0.7. This is like 0.5, and this is 0.3. These are all cumulative, and each planet can basically read from at most 3 of these lines because it'll always read from all planets, and then it'll have 2 designations. So suppose I have a planet that is designated as a core planet, sweet spot, and of course it's part of all planets. So what will it choose to do with its money? Well, it's going to have a pretty even split between manufacture and trade, because trade is appearing twice here in secondary, so these are kind of all added up. Preferentially, it's going to build up infrastructure, which means it's going to spend a lot of money on developing the DEAs it already has. It will also try to build research DEAs, and it'll build a couple of recreation DEAs, maybe only one, or maybe none if it's a small planet and just doesn't have enough regions to allow for that. Now, I haven't specified any government DEAs, but I have done it here in the new planet classification. So whenever I colonize a new planet, automatically when it starts, it's always classified as new and then something else. So although it will have these priorities, manufacturing, research, and recreation, it will also have government. And because, it might be, let's say, government, it might be new and, I don't know, frontier. I haven't defined anything for a frontier planet. So that's going to increase the relative priority that these have, because nothing is defined for frontier. Putting government as a tertiary policy, or maybe secondary, but usually tertiary is enough, on new planets basically guarantees that every colony gets like one government DEA. Now, sometimes it can get more than one, again 2 or 3, and then that starts to become excessive, and so you can go back and manually kind of correct things later on if you want to. I've put red and yellow ring. I've put an emphasis on terraforming to try to get those colonies up to our preferred environmental situation. And that's basically it. We've got mineral rich set to mine, because we do need to fuel our industry, especially early on. And then I've got 2 player defined programs, which depending on the species and the race you're playing, you might use these more or less. So I've got player defined 2 is research, research, research. Player defined 1 is manufacture, manufacture, military. Now, if you're playing a pretty well balanced race, which this kind of is, you might feel comfortable letting your colonies evolve and develop into sort of hybrid manufacturing and research colonies. But it can be better to focus certain colonies on manufacturing and certain colonies on research. And in particular, like if you're playing the Clacon, you need to have player defined 2, and you need to set this on like a ton of your colonies automatically just to get the amount of research required. And we're going to need to do this here too, which is why I have it defined, just not to the same extent as you have to do it with the Clacon. But it is important to really emphasize that some colonies have to be doing a ton of research just to bring the research up. And then there might be a specific colony or two where you want it to be a military manufacturing center, in particular if they're magnate civilizations, because sometimes for some species, the magnate civilization might have better ground troops than your native species. And so you want your ground troops to come from that species. As opposed to from yours. And so that is why you might want to dedicate a planet to manufacturing. Also, importantly, like we are putting manufacturing and research in our all planets, classification. But if you're playing like Cylons or whatever, you're going to be doing research, recreation, and trade probably as your all planets. So by default, your colonies are not going to be doing a lot of manufacturing. And in that case, you want to be using this player-defined manufacture kind of policy to specify certain colonies to be your manufacturing centers, because if you don't, you're just not going to have any manufacturing centers. So that's how the development plans work. So this is what we're going to use at the beginning. We can always tweak this later on, so nothing is set in stone. And so finally, we are going to go and tweak the DEAs for our homeworld, and this one we are going to manage manually. Now, we are not going to go for 2 research DEAs on our homeworld. We need to get industry going as soon as possible, because industry is just going to get colony ships built, and we need to get colony ships out. However, we are limited in our industrial capacity by our mineral output. So we need to get a couple of mines up in these mountains as soon as possible. We are going to need a recreation DEA on this planet because we did not take any specific bonuses to unrest reduction. And then, honestly, it'll probably be another industry DEA. And to tell you the truth, what we're going to do is we're going to replace these mines by industry as we get more mineral income. Now, we're going to be able to do this. The reason I'm so kind of cavalier about all this industry creation is because we're going to colonize this planet right away, which is green and very rich. So we are actually going to get a ton of mineral income pretty soon. So we might have a bit of imbalance here in terms of our mineral production, but it will be fixed pretty rapidly. There's something else that had just occurred to me, which I cannot think of right now. Oh, let's get this queue here. I'm gonna get a couple of scout ships out because we're starting in the core of the galaxy, so there tend to be a lot of different paths that we need to scout. So we'll try to do that. I'm trying to think if there was something else. There was something else. It just escaped my mind right now. Oh, I wanted to talk about population. So, in order for your DEAs to actually produce, they need to have population in them. Now, different DEAs have different requirements in terms of population. So first of all, you can see in each region there is a population. The population here is 1.1 out of 7, but that's just this region. The whole planet as a whole can, I guess, have 7 times 6, maybe 42 total population. The amount of stuff that is produced is increased based on the number of people that are working in the DEA. But some DEAs, like government DEAs, actually have a very high population requirement. And some of the technologies that you get are very good because they reduce the amount of population you need to run the DEA effectively. So, for example, there are some techs that require, it'll reduce the population requirement for industry or for government. And what that means is on a new colony with less population, the DEA is going to be more effective, even though you don't have a lot of people running there. That is the reason why, however, the mines and the farms tend to, like the mines in particular, require a low amount of population, which is why it's pretty easy to set up low population mining colonies, send those minerals to the homeworld, and have industry DEAs running in the homeworld because they're going to make better use of your high population. Rather than have the industry on your low population colonies, each industry DEA there is just going to produce less industry just because there aren't enough people to run all the factories. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. All right, we're basically done with the setup here. I think it's time to go and hit next turn for the first time. And I think we will transition now into more of a Let's Play format. I will probably do a fair bit of playing off camera and catch you guys up when something interesting happens. But for the first part, we'll definitely try to play as much of this interactively as we can. So let's get to it. Let's hit next turn. And we will... I was going to end the episode right now, but it's worth actually... We have a bit more time. I try to keep these at about 30 minutes. I didn't talk about the Senate. Being part of the Orion Senate means that you get these votes once in a while. As you can see, the new Orions they're like the NPC race at the center of the galaxy. They are super advanced technologically, and their votes overshadow everything we do early on. So it doesn't really matter how you vote on these initiatives early on. But for example, they want the weapons inspection referendum. The oppressor meter costs are increased by 15%, and foreign spies are 20% more likely to infiltrate an empire. So these have very interesting and impactful effects on the game. Early on, it doesn't really matter what you vote because it's whatever the new Orions want that's going to happen. But later on, you should pay close attention to these to know what modifiers are have taken effect. You can also propose bills. And the bills can be a number of on a number of issues, but they can also be diplomatic. So you can have a bill to condemn a certain nation. So if you have an opponent and you have a lot of support in the Senate, you can use the Senate to bully that opponent, and you can even try to get other people to declare war on that player. But the same thing can happen to you in reverse. If you are very unpopular in the Senate, people can use the Senate to bully you and to make other people either stop trading with you or even declare war against you. You can also get people into the Senate, which is important if you don't start off in the Senate, to make an ally who is in the Senate who will sponsor you for membership in the Senate. And that's a way that you can win a Senate victory, even if you started out in the boonies. Okay, that's going to be it for now. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.